Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. I'm delighted to welcome such a global audience to this Making Cities Resilience 2030 webinar entitled The Importance of National Government Leadership for Local and Urban Disaster Resilience. I am Adriana Campelo, and I am the Regional MCR 2030 Coordinator for the UNDRR's Regional Office for the Americas and the Caribbean, which is located in Panama. It's a pleasure to be your moderator for today's session. I'd like to start saying that we have translation down to the screen for Spanish and to English, and English to Spanish. It's a great pleasure to be with you today for this session, which has drawn a global audience of policymakers and practitioners interested in how the issue of national government leadership is so critical to scaling up local and urban resilience action. Our webinar will be conducted, as I mentioned, both in English and in Spanish. And please note that we have the simultaneous interpretation for both languages. And please use the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen to access this facility. The political declaration of the midterm review of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction in May last year reiterate the leadership role of national governments to prevent and to reduce disaster risk. National governments, they have the mandate, convening power and resources to bring implementation to scale. Effective national urban disaster resilience agendas are support long-term horizons for disaster and climate risk reduction, build stronger coalitions of political, regulatory, administrative, and legislative representatives and bodies focused on resilient solution and action. Open pathways for financing, increasing the capacity of national and local governments to develop more bankable project proposals and access more funding streams. Promote normative standard, multi-seat collaboration, and opportunity to scale up action. At the same time, the political declaration highlighted the critical importance of an all-of-society approach, an inclusive approach to risk reduction, with local governments playing a key role. Today, Global MCR 2030 webinar will showcase three countries in the American and Caribbean region that have rolled out coordinated local and urban resilience strategy under the leadership of national governments. I'm delighted to welcome representatives from the national governments of Brazil, Colombia, and Jamaica, who will share with us how the respective countries have been scaling up the their risk reduction ambitions and actions at local level. We're gonna hear from Mr. Nelson Hernandez, who is the MCR 2030 focal point from the National Department of Risk Management of Colombia. And Nelson has been working, I guess, now for more than 3 years with MCR, and he's delivering a remarkable work in Colombia, working with local government. And then we're gonna hear from Mrs. Filipa Ricketts Edmond, Director of Hazard Mitigation and Risk Management from the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development of Jamaica. Filipa is our, how can I say, she has a strong leadership, and he is our champion of MCR in Jamaica, working with the 14 parishes of Jamaica. And then we're gonna have Mrs. Samia Sulaiman, who is the coordinator of the Risk Mitigation and Prevention Department of the National Secretariat for Peripheries of the Ministry of Cities in Brazil. Samia has been working with local communities, with more vulnerable communities, and also delivering a remarkable work on including these people on planning for DRR. Each of our speakers will provide an opening overview on how urban disaster resilience is progressing in their respective countries. We will then have some time to pick up some comments and questions from you, from our audience. So please do use the question and answer function throughout all the webinar, the entire webinar. So without further ado, I'd like now to invite Mr. Nelson Hernandez from Colombia National Department of Risk Management of Colombia. And I'm gonna start asking Nelson a question. So Nelson, how was Colombia advanced the elaboration and the implementation of local DRR strategies along the MCR 2030 initiative? The floor is yours, Nelson.
Good morning, Adriana. The question wasn't clear. Can you repeat the question, please?
How was Colombia advanced the elaboration and implementation of local DRR strategies along the MCR 2030 initiative?
Thank you, Adriana, and greetings to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night for those who are connected. First of all, we'd like to thank you for the invitation in the name of the United for Disasters of Colombia. I can begin my presentation to provide the answer to your question. If you can please project the presentation.
No estoy seguro si se ve.
Todavía no.
Not yet. One moment.
Charlie, are you able to put the Colombia presentation up, please?
Ahora sí, Nelson. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you. Let's go on to the next slide, please.
Muy bien, gracias. La siguiente. Quisiera empezar
I would
esta
like to
presentación,
begin this presentation
poniendo en contexto de lo
putting
que
into
significa
context
Colombia.
of the reality.
Colombia es un país
Colombia is a
poco más de
country
52 millones
of over
de
52
habitantes
million inhabitants,
y está
and
en su división política
in its
administrativa
political
tiene
administrative direction, it has 1,500 municipalities with their own local government, distributed in 32 departments. It's important to understand that our national territory is a territory with this amount of municipalities, but likewise vary in the number of inhabitants. We have about 90% of the municipalities that represent a great population of the national territory, but have less resources. Precisely, this is what we have as our reality, and it's important to understand. Let's go to the next slide, please. Currently, we have over 73% of the population in urban areas. What we expect for 2050 is we will have reached over 85% of the population in urban zones. This is important. It's the same tendency globally or in the majority of the countries, but likewise, we understand that there's some important differences between the richer and the poor individuals. This situation of social vulnerability is very common in our countries, and this takes us to a high exposition in view of different events. Let's go to the next slide, please.
Next slide, please. Next. Thank you. Thank you.
Precisely this chart that we can see now, it seems complex, but what we see there is what we have of the last 40 years in Colombia. Here we have all of the presidential periods, and in all of this timeline, we have lived through different events, some of greater impact than others, many of them in hydrological origin, but we also have events of geophysical origin, which are less probable but are of greater impact. Colombia is a country that has the majority of the possible events from different origins, natural and human, non-intentional, but also social natural. We see with more frequency hydrological events of high impact. In Colombia, we have a territory, a geographically broken up territory. There are many territories that are in the side of mountains, but territories that are in flat areas that make them susceptible to torrential rains and others to flooding. Likewise, we have two coasts. We're the Caribbean coast, and there's an important exposition view of the yearly tropical cyclones and typhoons. This is exposed to possible events associated to tsunamis in the Pacific. We have registers of different seismic events, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, and events associated to the excess of rain and associated to dry times, where in Colombia it has its different times of frequent dry times. We're talking about the majority of the territory of the country has at least 2 frequencies of rain and 2 frequencies of drought, and this makes it susceptible to these types of events. Next slide, please. These conditions during all of these years have made us a territory that has learned from the events, and this learning has permitted us from 1988, we created the national system. This national system that we know as the National System of Disaster Risk Management is a system that involves all of the territories from national territory until subnational. In this political administrative division that the country has, the departments and the municipalities, there are different authorities who direct, coordinate, or advise the national system, the national in the departments and in the municipal areas. This direction of risk management in these territories, in the 3 levels of territories, the President of the Republic is in charge of. In the department, the department governor, and of the municipality, the mayor. There are also coordination structures, coordinators in the 3 levels as well. And the national level is the entity that I represent, which is National for Disaster Risk Management, that has this coordinating role of the national system. Similar structures are in the departments and municipalities, but there also exist some advisory entities that normally are made up by the public, by private entities, but also of the communities. These entities are called the Managed Risk Councils, and in all municipal territories locally and nationally, the National Advisory is made up of all of the representatives of the development sectors headed by the ministers, such as direct collaborators of the President of the Republic. Complementing the structure that makes it a structure and effective in terms of implementation in the territories. Likewise, there are planning instruments and financing mechanisms denominated as disaster risk planning, which are obligatory according to law. The Colombian legislation obligates the national territories and subnational territories to have a plan of disaster risk management, and this is precisely the success that the initiative will be to be resilient in Colombia, and this is evident because there are a lot of similarities between the Colombian legislation defined for the implementation of disaster risk reduction and the purposes that the global initiative has. These similarities have permitted us to work with the subnational territories in a manner that's a lot more fluid, with better coordination, with better communication, and with short-term results that have been more evident. If we go to the next slide, please. We have right now 175 municipalities of the 1,006 that are part of the initiative. This is part of something that we did in less than a year of dialogue with the different local authorities. And with them, we achieved to be part of this initiative, but not just fulfill the global initiative, but they should fulfill what the norm in Colombia demands of them. In this way, and with these types of motivations, we have achieved for the territories to slowly join the initiative, and we have strengthened a working network with the local territories and also with the department territories who have the role of coordinating their local territories within these jurisdictions. In this way, and with the participation of these municipalities, next slide, please, we have different categories. And the reason for this is that we have a high percentage of these municipalities within the initiative.
B and C is because they are compulsion from before with what the Colombian legislation has requested them to do regarding the risk management plans. This disaster risk management plans generate local resilience when these disaster risk management plans involve not only public entities and the public authorities sector, but also the local communities and the private sector. This articulation between the public and the private and the community allows that these tools for planning can be developed with the activities to know the risk, to allow us understanding more the factors that underlie the risk and the conditions of the risk in the land, but also measures to help reduce these conditions of the risk, not only the existing ones, but also the future ones. And on the other hand, understanding these are territories that are permanently or frequently under adverse events. This also allows that through these measurements, we can strengthen preparation for the, answer this and for recover, and like the way that we answer this and we recover, this mechanism that we have been developing with the territories in the last 3-4 years have allowed us also to not only have 175 municipalities in the initiative, but also now 3 recognized municipality plans that are like resilience nodes, and a fourth one that we're trying to have is the city of Cali. Cali is the next host for the Diversity Cup in October this year. In the next slide, we can see the next slide. We can see also the advances that we have made with these territories that are resilient nodes and territories where we have generated this network. Next, please. And through this network, we have had a development that is important and compliance with some indicators that we proposed as a national system. And within those indicators for the next year, for this and the next year, we want to have a bigger presence of support in the national context, as we have been doing in cooperation with the Office of the United Nations for the risk management in Panama City, but also consolidating and strengthening that national network where we have been involving organizations that are associated, for example, with municipalities and departments, capital cities, but there's also control entities such as the procurers and speakers and other national organizations, public and private also, that are within this network to support the territories in this initiative. We also have defined indicators to keep strengthening the local territories, not only thinking on increasing the number of municipalities in the initiative, but also towards trying to achieve with the help and technical assistance those municipalities in category A to go higher on the category B, and then the ones in B to go in category C. That's the purpose in this year. And at the end, making a bet on the lands that have less capabilities. And I think we have marked a difference that is important with one of the recognized municipalities, a node of resilience, which is called Dos Quebradas, which is the only city that is not capital city and that has very limited resources. In this way, we thought that it has a lot more merit for a territory with very few resources, and with those few resources achieving very important results in comparison with municipalities that have more resources and that can more easily achieve the same results. So in this sense, we are trying to concentrate those territories with less resources, and that we know that with good planning and a good coordination we can obtain important results. With this, I want to conclude my presentation. Adriana and everyone, thank you so much, and I'm here for the moment of your questions to continue or deepen in what you consider that is necessary. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nelson. I think your presentation was very insightful, and I'd like to comment on few points to kind of start our reflection on that. First, the importance of to have a good governance in terms of vertical governance. So Colombia has been an example on that, and how you really need to integrate the different levels of governance to deliver a good work on the ground, where people are actually living and where things happen and where disaster happens as well. The other point is the need to understand the locals. So Nelson, you explained the variety of threats that you have, but also you showed to us how Colombia have different characteristics from one side of the country to the other side of the country. And I know that what you're doing and the way that you are delivering the strategy, you are paying attention on municipalities at the Caribbean coast, municipalities that are on the high hills, on the mountains, municipalities that are at the Amazon forest, also municipalities at the other side of the coast. So I think there is a message here that for me is very important. It's important to understand the local needs. The cities, they are not all the same of others. They have different cultural difference, physical differences, difference in governance. So we need to understand that to address resilience. And the third aspect that you mentioned, and I think it's very important, and I think our colleague Samia would elaborate on this a little bit more as well, is social inequality. How social inequality is a negative aspect to make communities more vulnerable. So we've been working on how it's important to reach equality as an element to reduce risk. So I think these points, the entire presentation was excellent, and I'm sure that the colleagues will have many questions, but I'd like to reflect on this point, and maybe you can discuss this further. Thank you very much. And then I'd like to invite Samia. So Samia is the coordinator of the, so let me find the, Samia's title is very long. So Samia, it's a coordinator of the GRR, Risk Mitigation and Prevention Department of the National Secretariat for Peripheries of the Ministry of City. It's a new kind of national secretariat in Brazil and probably in the world. And I'm gonna ask Charlie to share Samia's presentation, please. Samia, welcome.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Adriana. Can you hear me? I am at the moment in an event of the national government, which is a World Day for the Environment, and here we're discussing the subject of the climate change and inclusive climate adaptation and fair urban resilience. My presentation is in Portuguese, but I'm going to speak in Spanish. But I thank you for the invitation because the subject is very important, and I think many know that we have going through in the south of Brazil an extreme event with a intense level and a territorial level, but this has showed us that the prevention and mitigation problem and adaptation is emergent and is important, as well as the way we answer. And the whole national government is reorganizing for policies, investment, and planning, and articulating between the ministries and the national governments to advance. And this is an important point that the turning point we're living for a prevention future. And they can have the climate change is an important point, but for that to be organized, it is important to have the historic that we're living of a passive environment, but social in Brazil. That is social spatial segregation, violence, and the precarious infrastructures or absent infrastructure of the problems, the fragility in the waters and the environment, sanitation, and something that we are placing in the top of the discussion is the environment racism and the injustice in environment and climate that becomes more intense with extreme events and the climate change. So the agenda that we are discussing now, mainly from the Ministry of the Cities that was created again from last year, is how to highlight and emphasize the problem of poverty, apart from the environment problem and the economical and social subject and climate change and the risk reduction, how poverty is a point that must be in the direction of the investments. And you can change for the next slide. And I'm talking about this point because in the Ministry of Cities has 5 secretariats that are in specific subjects.
Next slide, Charlie. Sorry, Samia. Next slide.
We have secretariats of mobility, of housing, of sewage, of urban development and metropolitan development. And from last year, we have a secretariat of peripheries or self-built neighborhoods or favelas with the perspective of treating these territories not with punctual policies of thematic of sector policies, but to understand the territory under social complexity with social environment vulnerabilities. And from this point, the Secretariat has 2 departments, one for urbanization or improvement of neighborhoods, and the other one is a department for the mitigation and prevention of risks. And it's something that is new. It's not something that is not in the system of protection and civil protection, but a strategy that has a perspective of prevention, but more for towards a development, a stronger development for preparation and even when we have a response in the south, but a space that is more structured, specifically to discuss prevention and risk mitigation towards the more vulnerable territories. I was very happy here to present a little bit of what we are developing and also listen to questions or observations and then talk about Colombia, which is an example for us, which is decentralized management. And I wish we could in some way try from the national government level, go to the more municipal level and reach the communities, try to see a little bit the perspective that we're developing from last year. We're still in the process of organizing and planning and articulating with the local governments, but it's a process that has been built from the United Nations risk reduction, the agenda of 2020 that we have been organizing this year to try to see how we can manage inequalities and vulnerabilities, and from a point of view that is the most important for the risk reduction for disasters. Now I'm gonna present a little bit of what is the point of transformation in the cities, which is towards the inclusive adaptation and fair resilience, see it from the social point of view historically, and that the new recoveries on infrastructures are in the sense of adaptation and mitigation of risk with integrated urban projects, and that in that process we can have training and support for the local governments and entities. Next slide, please. We have, from this point of view, an investment of resources. The new package for resilience is an investment for resilient cities and for urbanization and disaster prevention. And it has an important value from the national government level. And we're also working with the subject of water from the point of view of the Ministry of Cities. From the Secretariat of Peripheries, we work with the urbanization and protecting from landslide and some subjects of sanitation and floodings. Next slide. And what I'm going to show you fast now is how we're looking at risk reduction from the point of view of reduction of inequalities in the territory. The first point is regarding the living peripheries, which is improving the neighborhoods, reorganizing favelas. is important from the first government of President Lula. But in this moment, we have reorganized the program not only for the urban structure, but also supporting social equipment actions in the territory with a space of discussion with the community to develop a plan with the population, not only in the infrastructure, but also see the macro to understand the problems, seeing the risks and the interventions that are needed from the point of view of the infrastructure, but also monitoring and citizen support and technical assistance that we can organize this peripheral territory as a space of life, a space of cultural production, of employment, apart from the urban infrastructure. And this has demanded an effort of coordinated actions between the different ministries, not only the city's ministry, but also regional development, cultural, education, health, to direct, to bring resources from the national level for the land that's going to receive this investment, but also to create integrated actions from the point of view of the local government with the secretariats that can also bring resources of healthcare, education, with many different public policies, different perspectives to reduce not only the disaster risks, landslides and flooding, but also the social risk, the economical risk, and how can widen the security from the point of view of equality for those territories that are socially more vulnerable. The other strategy that we have been developing is for the peripheries in risk that is also working from the point of view of prevention and mitigation. Of course, all these programs, while we are developing them together with the territories, they open also the door to work for the preparation and the response. Can you please change the slide? In this sense, the strategy in the peripheries under risk has three main lines. First one is infrastructure, but also the protection of the mountains. We are drafting how to create strategies and solutions based in nature, also to change the environment quality of these territories, because we have now new risks in the Brazilian cities, which are the heat waves. This year we had very extreme events. So how can we also think this infrastructure with a green infrastructure to improve as well from the point of view of the environment, the periphery areas, and support municipal plans for risk reduction that has been lost as a national policy that was very punctual. It's mapping, working with sectors, working with community workshops to see the perception of the risk in communities and indicate strategies of infrastructure and improvement of security for the territories, that also the municipalities can access resources from the national government or create in the perspective those infrastructures. And also we are working with community plans for the risk to discuss with the population, which are the social mapping on risk, not only for disasters connected to climate change, but also healthcare and housing, different types of risk that the population can identify them and can also do some social interventions that can be punctual and access also for the municipalities or national governments at different levels. We are trying to see how to finance the community groups to do some interventions and do some planning for intervention and prevention of risks.
Communication and social articulation is necessary so that these work of financing, but of culture can be developed. Please go to the next slide. We are working likewise in production of publications, materials, technical materials as community, so that the community leaders can understand their role in mapping, in diagnosis, and that they can develop a social perspective of risk reduction. And since the point of view of the Secretariat, we have the caravans to go to the territories to speak of the policies, because part of the inequality of infrastructure or vulnerability is the knowledge, not just of risk, but of the public policies. So likewise, we're in a process of speaking with what risk, what mitigation, and how the national government from the Secretariat is working and supporting local projects. In this sense, we have two important initiatives that the MAP, which is a geoportal with the idea of mapping distress territorial strategies, can be of education and of risk reduction, to support a more positive vision of the Periferia Viva, which is mapping these initiatives and to have financing to amplify their strategy. After Colombia, of thinking and the governance is something that we are developing and that we need, but luckily it's an initiative from the national government where we're working, which is interministerial governance of the cities, working with other ministries in programs together, or launched on the Green Cities, Resilient Green Cities initiative, and a program that comprises the Ministry of Cities, Ministry of Science and Technology, and the Ministry of Environment to collect investments and projects for urban projects to arrive and with more resources to the local governments. And we have an important organization with universities to develop methodologies of mapping of disaster risk reduction, of articulation, likewise with the communities, as the universities can produce knowledges to have a technical assistance of support that we are developing with local governments, and the Secretary of Local Governments work in an integral manner, not just of works or of civil registry, but their programs are organized that have their territory and their vulnerabilities to reduce the inequalities, such as the strategy of adaptation and resilience. In this sense, we are trying to organize a governance strategy that can support to organize a vision, integral vision of the projects of disaster risk reduction, principally in the more vulnerable communities. This is what I would like to present, and I thank you once again for the invitation. This is the last my contact. The last slide is my contact, and I'm here for the conversation at the end. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Samia. Very good presentation. Just to comment on few topics that you mentioned. The first one is climate justice. So I think the work that you've been doing, it's very much connect on that. So how can we diminish inequality, and how can we be more inclusive on bringing people not only as a protagonist of this work of GRR. And the other point that also I'd like to mention is how you highlight the prevention. So we need to manage risks, and we don't want to manage disasters. So I think this is a mind change that and governments at all levels need to face it. I'm very happy that you are working with this. And I also would like to mention for our audience that MCR has some tools to create more inclusive DRR plans. So one of these tools is the inclusion of people with disability. We've been working in many cities with this tool. Today I saw a number that we have more than 1,700 people already impacted by this tool. So this is very powerful. And now we are launching another tool in terms of gender equality. So how can we bring to DRR planning gender equality, knowing that people, the most, the poor and people suffer, people LGBTQ mass population, sorry, suffer the most in episodes of disaster. So thank you very much for bringing your vision. And I'd like to now to ask our colleague, Ms. Filipa Ricketts Edmund. Filipa is Director of Hazard Mitigation and Risk Management of the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development of Jamaica. And I will ask Charlie to share Filipa's presentation. Filipa, please welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation and for allowing me to share stage with Colombia and Brazil to provide information on how we coordinate our local and urban resilience strategies under the national government. So thank you, and it is a pleasure to be here and to share our information. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Are we seeing the screen?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right. So it's not moving. All right. So just want to give a little background as to what the presentation will entail. We'll be looking at just a short summary of disasters and climate risk challenges that Jamaica is experiencing, our disaster management operation, building disaster resilience at the local and community level, as well as the adoption and the utilization of the UNDRR scorecard to improve our local disaster risk management program. We'll also be looking at the how we go about from scorecard to action planning and implementation. And I also have just a few little recommendations as to how we can also improve. All right, just to give a little background in terms of our challenge, just to Jamaica, our population is just about 2.8 million, and majority of little over 50% of our population live in urban areas. We are doing a lot of development, and so we don't want to look at development and disaster management separate. We want they both impact each other. So we would be facing are facing a number of disaster challenges, and they are increasingly critical as the frequency and intensity of natural disaster rise due to climate change. We are mainly affected by hurricane, storm surge, flooding from torrential rainfall, drought, bushfire, and earthquake. And just to give us some information of our late impact that we would have had in terms of earthquake, we would have been affected or experienced magnitude ranging from magnitude 4.2 to 5.6, and that's in 2003 over into 2004. And we also, in 2023, it was recorded 6,443 bushfires across all the parishes that we have. And since the start of 2024, we would have already experienced 2,134 bushfires. Like I'd have mentioned before, in terms of our increased frequency and severity of extreme weather events as a result of climate change, our most vulnerable population is at times affected, as well as our infrastructure. And when we speak about our vulnerable population, we're talking about persons with disability, children, women, and especially persons who are living in flood-prone areas. We would have also have displacement of populations where persons have to seek emergency shelter whenever there is an impending hurricane, or even during the height of the storm, person would have to be evacuated from their homes to emergency shelters. And of course, all those activities, all those impacts would definitely have an impact on our economy and our ecosystem degradation, where we would have experienced biodiversity loss, as well as the services that our ecosystem provides. We would have seen a degradation of that. And just to give a background of our disaster risk management framework, the government of Jamaica, through the Ministry of Local Government, has a systematic process designed to identify, assess, and reduce the risk of disaster. It aims to lessen the impacts of disasters through prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. And just to show an idea of what the structure looks like, our National Disaster Risk Management structure is chaired by our Prime Minister and Deputy Chairman, which is the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development, and he is the Honorable Minister Desmond McKenzie. And we also have a national coordinator, which is the Director General from the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, as well as there are several committees of council that also provide support to disaster risk management. We also have a local structure that is headed by the Parish Disaster Committee and the Parish Disaster Preparedness Executive headed by the mayor, as well as there's a disaster coordinator, and they also reports to the ODPM and the Ministry of Local Government, as by virtue of the fact that they are one of our agencies that falls under the portfolio responsibility of the Ministry of Local Government. And just to add that the ODPM is also a portfolio agency that also falls under the responsibility of the Ministry of Local Government. We also have a community structure where we have our community disaster risk management group, zonal committees, as well as there is a group known as a community emergency response teams. And you know, we can't do anything. These are the first responders in a given event, and they provide the necessary support, volunteerism, volunteering, their resources and their time in assisting in responding to disaster and assisting in reducing the impact that the hurricane or whatever disaster may have on the citizens. So we are basically aligned to the Jamaica long-term strategic development plan, which is Vision 2030, and we focus on goal number 4, which is Jamaica has a healthy environment. Outcome 14, hazard risk reduction and adaptation to climate change. And yes, we align to our national policy. However, it is also imperative that we translate international agreement and national policy into local actions, which requires strong governance structure. And so we aligned our disaster risk management program to the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, as well as the regional disaster risk management framework. In terms of our resilience, in terms of initiative that we take at the national level, The National DRM initiative encompasses a wide range of strategies and actions aimed at reducing disaster risk. These initiatives are designed to enhance resilience of communities, protect lives and property, and ensure rapid and effective response and recovery when disasters occur. And these are just some of the examples of activities that would have or is undertaken. I know that we are in the hurricane season, the start of the hurricane season. There are a number of activities that are now happening where the local authorities are preparing and ensuring that their state of readiness is on par in the event that we are going to be affected by a hurricane. At the national level, we have a comprehensive disaster policy, which is at a green paper stage. We also are improving our early warning system, and this is through funding and technical support from JICA. We also have our shelter program that I would have mentioned before, where persons would have to go to emergency shelter in vulnerable areas threatened by floods. Capacity building is a strong area. Public education and awareness, building disaster resilience community. We would have made building disaster resilience a part of our disaster risk management focus. And this is very important. It's not just to say we are building disaster or use the term, but we want to ensure that our programs reflect, or the operation plans that we develop have some amount of activities or strategies that would have allowed us to strengthen our resilience at the community level. And of course, we also report into the Sendai framework monitoring system, and we would have also integrate the UNDRR scorecard into the operation plan, and having all the municipal corporations sign on to the Making City Resilience 2030 initiative. As it relates to, in terms of the stages that we would have followed over the years since the inception of MCR, Making City Resilience, we would have seen where in 2010, all 14 MCs joined the UNDRR Making City Resilience campaign by signing up and adopting to the 10 essentials for Making City Resilience to guide disaster risk reduction planning and decision making. And in 2019, we were introduced to the MCR 2030. And this was done through a workshop with support from the UNDRR. And this allowed for ownership and buy-in from relevant stakeholders and to increase institutionalization of DRR at the local level. And at this workshop, we would have had our our disaster coordinators, urban planners, and engineers who were also present at this meeting, as we want to ensure that building disaster resilience is not only the responsibility of disaster coordinator, but it's going to take an integrated approach to ensure that the resilience that we're seeking to build is supported by these experts. We would have mentioned about the scorecard, where we have successfully completed all MC successfully completed the MCR 2030 scorecard, and this was done through a participatory process, and this was done prior to the hosting of the regional platform. This was not only the effort of the Ministry of Local Government, but would have also received some amount of support from the Office of Disaster Preparedness to ensure that all MCs would have, within a short time, complete their scorecard, for them to understand that it not only responds, we want to be more proactive. And what we would have found out from the scorecard, it would have allowed us to be more well-rounded and to understand what building disaster resilience means and what it takes to build our resilience. One of the areas that we saw is and which is very important, is understanding our risk. And so we are ensuring that our municipal corporations do carry out the necessary activities to understand their risk. Because if we do not understand our risk, then the strategy that we want to put in place, then it would be futile. We want to ensure that it is an informed decision. In addition to registering onto the MCR 2030 initiative platform, Jamaica is the first country in the world to have all its local authorities committed to strengthening disaster resilience. While I understand, yes, this is 14 municipal corporations comparing to Colombia, who would have reported over 1,700 municipal corporations, and they would have also reported 700 MCs or 700 authorities that would have signed on to Making City Resilience, which is a very good effort for Colombia. But to have our Jamaican local authorities sign on to the MCR 2030, it was a great effort to ensure that they understand the process and see the importance of Making City Resilience. And just to show you a snippet of our municipal corporation and the scores that they would have, and the scores that were allocated to them based on what the review would have bring forward. The indicators that the parish have reported on had allowed the ministry to establish a baseline measurement of the parish's level of disaster resilience and have increased awareness and understanding of the challenges MC faces. This will further assist the ministry to identify programs and activities that can be implemented. We also would have gone ahead and do a validation of scorecard to ensure accuracy of the information that they would have provided, ensure that it is effective, as well as for the information or whatever that what they had put out to be accepted by the disaster management stakeholders. And it is also important to mention that during the process, we also have our political personnel who were also a part of the process, who also provide necessary information. So it is important that political buy-in into the process is given. And just to the graph that I have here shows the all the 14 municipalities and the percentage. We know that we have a lot of work to do, 141 indicators, and I believe that it's less than 50% would have of our municipal corporation scored less than 50% of the scores that were allocated to the 141 indicators. So we have the MC working assiduously to reduce their risk. A number of activities were carried out or is in the process of being carried out to support the MCR 2030 initiative, and they are working towards mainstreaming disaster risk reduction, resilience strategy, and activities across their disaster risk management structure. There are a number of indicators that require well-needed attention due to the low scoring that would have been assigned. And for example, the strengthening financial capability for resilience was an area that came out very strong, and that falls under essential 3 of the UNDRR 10 essentials. We also see where safeguarding natural buffers to enhance the protective function offered by natural capital would have also given a low score. And this is an area where we need to ensure that a number of work or more focus is placed on preserving and conserving our natural environment, as they do provide or reduce our risk as well. Just to give an example of some of our activities that we would have carried out, for the parish of Portland, we would have done a risk perception through a workshop, and this workshop aimed to obtain an understanding of how community members understand and perceive hazards and disaster risk and their level of participation in disaster risk reduction activities to determine where there are synergies as it relates to their level of awareness. And just to say that the perception was based on early warning system. And there are a number of strategies or ideas that came out of this workshop that I'm quite sure that the municipality of Portland would be ensuring that they incorporate those recommendations and ideas into their disaster management program. We also had the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation would have applied the disaster resilience and addenda to support the development of a local disaster risk reduction strategy and action plan. And again, this was done through support from the UNDRR to bolster their capacity to develop their local disaster risk reduction strategy and plan and applying the scorecard. So most of what we would have done is basically capacity building for the disaster, for the municipal corporations. And through this activity at the KSAMC would have also have done a number of prioritization of action and for that would also inform the development of their comprehensive disaster management plan. And through this, we would have also done a vision board for the KSAMC, and it was very interesting as to how this vision board can also and will be used to enhance the resilience of the Kingston metropolitan area. We also would have participated in or give the necessary support to the municipal corporation in Trelawney as it relates to creating a robust disaster risk management strategic and operation plan aligned to the national DRM disaster risk management plan and also mainstream targets from making city resilience into their operation plan. So what would have done, right? Rather than having some ad hoc activity going on, we want to ensure that the scorecard is now integrated and form part of the municipal corporation action. So rather than just doing a project that lasts for a certain period of time, we want to ensure that there is sustainability, and sustainability is going to be through ensuring that the operation plan and their strategic plan reflects these activities, and so that it can be an ongoing building resilience. We also have participated in a capacity building, and this was for the St. Mary Municipal Corporation, and it was a climate action tool and climate bond initiative deep dive workshop where we have representative participated in this activity. And this was the UNDRR MCR 2030 initiative in partnership with Climate Bond Initiative. And so it has opened an opportunity for the municipal corporation to see and to identify various funding agencies, as well as to develop proposals that are bankable, and for them to improve on their risk financing capacity. The purpose of the workshop was to strengthen the capacity of government in the Americas and Caribbean region to analyze climate risk and link them to disaster risk reduction plans, also to strengthen their capacity to access funds for implementation of climate action. And I can tell you that this workshop was very good because the Ministry of Local Government also participated, and it would have opened some information networking as to how we also can tap into resources that exist. In terms of recommendation for improvement, we understand that Well, I have for the first one is the need for increased support from UNDRR in localizing MCR 2030. And we want to thank the UNDRR for the many work, for all the work that and the support that they would have given in thus far. But I believe that there could be some more engagement right across the municipal corporation and exposure exchange in terms of information exchange and having disaster coordinators or expertise from Jamaica, getting the best practices from other persons or agencies within the region. Public-private partnership is also another area where there needs to be some improvement. Private partners have the important resources and expertise to help build communities' resilience. They can also help us to utilize the resources, rather than we are doing overlapping and working in silos. It's important that we come together and put the resources together because the resources that we do have is limited. And another recommendation that we can also focus on is creating a nexus between climate change and disaster risk reduction. Whatever initiative adaptation that is happening within the climate change space, it does have a co-benefit towards disaster risk reduction, and important that we aligned our programs and integrate climate change activity within the disaster risk reduction and not to see them as two separate things, because whatever is done in disaster risk reduction is also a co-benefit towards climate change adaptation. Better documentation and reporting at the national and local level for further reporting into the Sendai framework. Yes, we are reporting into the Sendai framework from a national perspective, but disaster management and disaster actions, they're also local. And so it's also going to be important that local authorities provide the necessary information that can assist in reporting into the Sendai framework as well. And the last one is encourage municipal corporation to share information on initiatives undertaken that support building disaster resilience on the MCR 2030 platform. As I would have mentioned, all our MCs would have signed on to the Making City Resilience, but we just don't want to stop there. We want to ensure that whatever strategy, whatever activities that they are doing and carrying out, that they also report into the platform where persons can go and view what we are doing at the local level, and also can use it as a best practice to improve their disaster risk resilience at the regional level. And that ends my presentation. Again, thank you so much, Adriana, for the opportunity to do a presentation from a Jamaica perspective.
Thank you very much, Philippa. It was very good to hear you and to know more about the experience in Jamaica. That is very comprehensive, and we do take notes of your recommendation, very valuable for our work. And we need to wrap up this webinar because we ran out of time. But I'd like to thank you very much for these three wonderful speakers, Samia, Nelson, and Philippa, and congratulate you all on the good work that you are doing. Also, I'd like to say that my colleague Clement put the email on the question and answer. So we are not able to take questions right now, but we will connect you. And also this webinar is recorded and we can share with you guys. Before finish it, I'd like to say thank you to my colleague, Andrew McRow, who is the global leader of MCR 2030 and was the person who organized this, and it's pushing us in our region to go further, working with local governments. Also, I'd like to thank you, Charlie. It's very late in Incheon. So thank you very much, guys, for being with us. Thank you to you all. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hope see you in next webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Well done.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Obrigada.
Good.